Let's go live to Melbourne, where Rebel News' Avi Yemini is this morning. Good morning, Avi, to you here from Good Evening from Washington. Obviously, Australia is one of the first countries waking up on October the 7th. And what is going to be planned there? What's the mood there on the streets?
I've got to say, firstly, just listening, thanks for having me, listening to that complete dishonesty from your previous guest, from the numbers of within Gaza to the fact that these protests are not anti-Semitic. Complete and utter nonsense. We woke up in Melbourne just today, October 7 here now in Melbourne. We woke up in the most progressive suburb of Melbourne with graffiti on a building that says glory to the martyrs, and then more graffiti on a building nearby calling for October 7 to be repeated. Remember, this is the most progressive neighbourhood in Melbourne. It's a mask-off moment. This is exactly what the so-called Free Palestine movement believe in. And this is on the second anniversary of the most brutal terrorist attack in which they breached Israel's borders, they raped, they murdered, they kidnapped whoever they can get their hands on, and then they paraded their victims in Gaza to cheering mobs. And this graffiti, these messages are being put out in the progressive neighborhoods on a day where we're so close to peace, because this was never about freeing Palestine. This was never about a ceasefire. These people, they are telling us exactly what they want. They want this to continue happening. They want Hamas to win, meaning they want the annihilation of the state of Israel. And anybody that tells you any differently is either naive or lying.
But how do you square that circle, Avi? And I know that's like one of the biggest questions in hundreds of years of conflict, because they want the complete annihilation of Israel and of the Jewish people, and that is their golden aim. How can anybody change their mind on that? And also, I guess the second question for that is, therefore, do you think that Netanyahu's response has been proportionate 2 years on?
Look, I'm not the Prime Minister of Israel. I don't get to see and make all the decisions. I don't know how you would prosecute a war like this, in such a tough war against an opponent that is happy to die and to sacrifice their entire people for your destruction. But what we're seeing now is that there is a real chance for peace, and that is not because Hamas has suddenly agreed to do it. It's because Trump has brought the entire Arab and Muslim world. We're seeing suddenly Indonesia, they're talking at the UN saying shalom. In what world did we ever think this was possible? Where did we think Qatar and Saudi Arabia were going to be on board, the Palestinian Authority on board with a 20-point peace plan? I know your previous guest blamed Israel again, took no responsibility for Gaza, for what they for Hamas, what they did 2 years ago today. Instead blames Israel for not agreeing to what he claims to be the same deal that was on the table months ago, which is just not true. They need to take responsibility, and I think the people of Gaza need to stand up and take ownership of their future. They have a chance now, thanks to President Trump. But today, we need to remember what happened and how this war started 2 years ago.
Avi, what's the mood in Australia like about protests? Is your government also turning the dial to clamp down on dissent? Because for me, that's going to be an unfortunate, and has been evidence, but an unfortunate consequence of this is that the state just want more powers to shut people up.
Look, it's tough because you don't ever want to give the state more power, especially power-hungry Labor governments like we have in Australia, like you have in Britain. But, the problem is they don't need more power. We have laws here. You have laws in Britain against incitement to violence. If they implemented and enforced the current laws, you won't need anything else to do it. And I think this is a time, what we're seeing in Melbourne this morning, waking up, and I'm sure you're going to wake up to similar scenes. We've got protests planned here today by the pro-Hamas group. I think people need to wake up. Every sensible person, rational person looking at this in Australia, in Britain, in Canada, need to see it for what it is. The far left and the Islamists and that are being cheered on by, you know, right-wing Nazi lovers, they're out for our destruction, and we need to stand up and unite. We don't have to agree on anything. That's why I'm so happy to see Israel finally inviting Tommy Robinson on a state visit to the country, a proper patriot that's willing to stand up and call it out for what it is, call out a lot of this nonsense for a long time that everybody was scared to say. You don't have to agree with everything he says. However, finally that recognition and that coming together of, you know, sensible, like-minded people who stand against radical Islam and the radical left.
Yeah. Okay. Avi, such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm a big fan. Rebel News' Avi Yemini there, doing great work. Thank you so much for joining me on GB News.